This episode deals with Russian war crimes and may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. 3 years into Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, the scars of Russian aggression run deep. What Moscow called a special military operation has become a systematic assault on civilians, with non-combatants squarely in the sights. I'm former Navy SEAL Chuck Pfarrer, and today we'll cover 5 of Russia's gravest war crimes. Right now, the Kyiv Post's point of impact. Using cluster munitions and drones, Russian forces have transformed evacuation routes, hospitals, and neighborhoods into kill zones. As of late 2025, the United Nations has verified more than 14,000 civilian deaths, though experts estimate the actual figure surpasses 30,000. Far from isolated errors, these acts form the blueprint of Russian terror. April 2022, Donetsk Oblast. As Russian troops advanced in the Donbass, Kramatorsk became a vital evacuation point. On the morning of the 8th of April, 4,000 civilians queued at the railway station for trains to take them out of the range of Russian guns. Most of them were women and children. At 10:30 a.m., without warning, a Russian Tuchka-U ballistic missile detonated in the sky over the train station. The belly of the missile burst open, and 50 9N-24 anti-personnel bomblets rained down. Each individual submunition weighed about 1.5 kilograms, configured to detonate on contact and inflict maximum damage. Caught in the open, the crowd was decimated, tearing some victims limb from limb and blasting white-hot shrapnel through the crowd. The Russian missile killed 63 civilians, including 9 children, and wounded over 150, many suffering life-threatening injuries. Missile debris bearing Russian serial numbers linked the strike to the 47th Missile Brigade of Putin's 8th Combined Arms Army. Radar data confirmed that the Tuchka was fired from occupied territory near the Russian frontier. One of the missile's tail fins had the words, "For your children," scrawled in Russian. A chilling admission of guilt. Moscow was quick to deny involvement. The Kremlin cynically alleged that Ukraine had staged the attack, but UN and Amnesty International confirmed it was a deliberate Russian effort to kill Ukrainian evacuees, and that made it a war crime. March 16th, 2022, Donetsk Oblast. Russia's 86-day siege of Mariupol leveled 95% of the city and displaced 450,000 residents. Missiles, bombs, rockets, and artillery flattened homes and businesses. Thousands of civilians were killed in indiscriminate strikes. Near the city center was the Donetsk Academic Regional Drama Theater. Designated as a safe zone and shelter for 1,500 refugees, its thick concrete walls made it a sturdy refuge. Inside were families with infants and elders. They had every reason to believe they were safe. The theater would soon gain infamy as the scene of Russia's most egregious war crimes. At 9:50 a.m., An Su-25 strike aircraft from the 960th Assault Aviation Regiment sortied from Primorsko-Atrocity airfield and approached Mariupol from the east. In the theater's parking lot, the word children was painted in 10-meter levels. The message was readable from 20,000 feet. The Russian pilot used it as an aim point. Diving on the theater, the jet released two FAB-500 delayed fuse glide bombs. Within seconds, the two weapons pierced the foot-thick concrete roof and exploded inside. The theater's thick walls served to concentrate the blast effect. Hundreds of people were killed instantly. As many as 600 civilians were believed to have been killed or wounded, with dozens of injured buried in the rubble. Video footage and survivor testimonies confirmed the strike was made by Russian aircraft, with targeting coordinates provided by Russian intelligence GRU Unit 26165. The attack was deliberate and calculated to kill. It typified the brutality of Russia's siege, and sources reveal that during the fight for the city, at least 8,000 additional civilians were killed by Russian shelling or famine or by summary execution. September 30, 2022, Zaporizhzhia Oblast. Ukraine's stunning Kyiv offensive claimed 12,000 square kilometers, straining Russian logistics and prompting Russian promises of safe corridors. One day after Putin's Kremlin ceremony annexing Zaporizhzhia and 3 other Ukrainian oblasts, fleeing Ukrainian civilians had been promised safe conduct by Russian forces. Taking Russia at its word, hundreds of Ukrainian refugees attempted to flee, choking the few highways without damaged bridges. On the outskirts of Zaporizhzhia city, near the Avtorodnik car market, scores of civilian vehicles were backed up in a traffic jam. They could have no idea that they had become a prime target. At 7:30 a.m., 16 S-300 missiles from Southern Military District batteries pummeled the traffic jam. As the missiles slammed into the roadway near the checkpoint, trucks and cars loaded with families erupted in fire and smoke. 30 civilians were killed instantly, including children. 100 more were seriously wounded with burns and shrapnel. Survivors and first responders used their bare hands to drag loved ones from blasted vehicles and burning cars. Trajectory analysis traced the launches to Russian-occupied territory, debunking Moscow's accusation of a Ukrainian military airstrike. July 8, 2024, Kyiv. Shortly after dawn, under orders from Air Force Chief Lieutenant General Sergei Kobylash, 3 Russian Tu-95 bombers lifted off from Russia's Engels 2 airbase. They headed south to designated launch points where they volley-fired a swarm of 40 Kh-101 cruise missiles towards the city of Kyiv. At 11:15 a.m., a Kh-101 launched from an aircraft commanded by Russian Major Denis Chinov slammed into its designated target, the Okhmatdyt Children's Hospital's oncology ward. The 400-bed facility for young cancer patients dissolved in flames and chaos. 2 staff perished instantly, an oncologist on rounds, and a janitor shielding children with his own body. Operating rooms were swept by flames. Infants were blasted out of their incubators. Leukemia patients hurled from their beds with IV lines dangling. 16 other patients were seriously wounded. The Russian attack claimed 42 lives citywide, including 5 additional children. Human Rights Watch and UN investigations cited shrapnel patterns and debris from the missile itself. Examination of pieces of the missile's navigation module ruled out an accident. Kyiv Post reporters on the scene reached the same conclusion. This was a deliberate strike on a Ukrainian hospital. Just one of more than 1,200 Ukrainian clinics and medical facilities that have been deliberately targeted by Russian precision strike munitions. Russian General Kobylash, who greenlighted this terror, was indicted by The Hague in September for war crimes. March 2022, Kyiv Oblast. One of the most horrifying war crimes of the 21st century occurred in the town of Bucha, north of Kyiv. The Bucha massacre stands out as the infamous apex of Russian brutality, a methodical civilian slaughter that exemplifies Russia's institutional viciousness. After failing to seize Kyiv, Russian units retreated from the suburbs and eventually into Bucha. From late February to March 31st, the 76th Guards Air Assault Division attempted to hold the town amid street fighting. The Russians were loaded down with looted furniture and stolen toilets. And a Russian armored column was surrounded and destroyed in the street by Ukrainian troops, killing scores of Russian paratroopers. As Ukraine pressed hard, Russian unit cohesion failed. Russian tanks and IFVs began to target evacuees and staged ambushes of civilian vehicles with tanks. Ukrainian advancements and encirclements eventually drove the paratroopers out. On April the 1st, Ukrainian forces secured the town. In it, to their horror, they discovered the bodies of hundreds of civilians, many bound and shot execution style. Yablunska Street alone was littered with the corpses of 36 civilians, men, women, and children executed by the 234th Guards Air Assault Regiment. Ditches in adjacent streets were filled with corpses, disfigured by torture and sexual assault. A UN probe cataloged hundreds of extrajudicial killings. Looting and arson by Russian troops was obvious. It was a feeble attempt to destroy evidence. In total, 450 Ukrainian civilians were murdered by rampaging Russian troops. The Russians delighted in murder. They posted social media videos of their barbarity. Linking the crimes by geolocated phones and videos, the New York Times confirmed that the 234th, led by Lieutenant Colonel Artyom Gordolyov, was one of the units responsible. By September 2025, the Sunday Times named 13 Russian commanders, from Major General Sergei Chabarerkin of the 76th to Lieutenant Colonel Azatbek Umerbekov of the 64th Motor Rifle Brigade, tying them and over 80 subordinates as suspects in cases of murder and depraved sexual violence. Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty's April 2025 reporting verified that Russians deliberately ambushed vehicles of fleeing refugees using tanks and anti-tank missiles. Ukrainian arrest warrants have been issued for almost 100 Russian officers, NCOs, and private soldiers. All are subject to international sanction from entities including the United States, the European Union, the UK, and Canada. They are charged with gross human rights violations, including the rape and torture of civilians. The atrocity at Bucha was the most infamous event of Russia's campaign of deliberate civilian predation. But healing has begun, though justice has yet to be served. Ukraine has restored Bucha's streets, and Okhmatdyt's hospital wards are working again, though International Criminal Court arrest warrants targeting figures like Kobylash have yet to be served. These 5 atrocities, committed over 1,000 days of Ukrainian resistance, thread Russia's chronicle of carnage. Still, Ukraine rebuilds even as it fights. Streets are repaved and hospitals repaired. Ukraine endures not as a victim, but as an unflinching witness of Russian savagery. Ukraine's victory will not be etched in vengeance, but justice. Not in destruction, but in the bloom of rebuilt playgrounds and the laughter of healed children. You may be assured justice will be served, and the guilty, wherever they run, wherever they try to hide, they will be hunted down, punished. Indomitable, Ukraine continues to fight. For the Kyiv Post, I'm Chuck Pfarrer. I'll see you again at the point of impact.